You're listening to the Good Food CFO podcast, where we focus on financial strategies for building a profitable food business. I'm your host, Sarah Delavan. Today on the podcast, I am joined by Brady DeLong. He is an 8-year veteran of the natural CPG space, building Hen of the Woods as their COO and national sales director. A fellow advocate of building a business on your own terms, Brady is sharing words of wisdom and lessons learned over the last 8 years, like how excitedly making deals at a food show resulted in the brand hemorrhaging money and what they did to recover financially. He's sharing what they learned from growing into a national brand in just 6 months with KeHE and how that compares to the way they grow their business today. And he's also sharing how he and his team analyze every opportunity to determine if it's a yes or a no-go. Brady has so much to share, and I cannot wait for you to hear it. Let's get to it. Brady, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Sarah. Good to see you.
You as well. I am super excited for this conversation today. I always like to share how I get connected to people when they join me on the podcast. And you, like so many of our guests to date, I got connected with through LinkedIn and our mutual contact, Felice Thorpe. So shout out to LinkedIn and Felice for connecting me with like really awesome people. So
I mimic that. Yep.
Yeah.
Felice she's connected me with a couple of different people, and we've barely known each other. And now I feel like we're talking every day or something. So
it's great. I love it so much. So you are the COO and national sales director for Hen of the Woods, right?
Correct. Yes.
And prior to being in this role, you were in a culinary role with a company by the same name or a restaurant by the same name. Can you tell us a little bit about like the history and how you got to the role that you're in today?
Yeah. So myself and the owner of Hen of the Woods, we go back to like 2005. I was working in a restaurant. I just kind of started my professional, if you will, culinary career. I'd had a couple of restaurant jobs prior to that, but this was my first time working in a fine dining restaurant and having an Italian chef. And, it's, if you've watched The Bear lately, it's not that bad. Like that's a slight exaggeration, but we all do carry our own spoons and we all drink out of deli containers. That is very much true. But he had moved back in town. We met there. We kind of hit it off, became good friends. He eventually moved on, got a sous chef job at another restaurant, and asked if I'd come out there and cook with him, just because we meshed our styles, played well together, and we communicated well. We had fun working together. So I went out there with him, worked with him for a few years, and I left there with one of our other coworkers to start our own catering and private chef company, which we started right before the 2008 economic collapse. Okay. And our bread and butter was boxed lunches for corporations. And so that line item was deleted almost instantly. So that was the first time I learned about pivoting, and we had to pivot, and we essentially had to go find the CEOs and the leadership of those corporations and see if they needed private chefs. And so we went more in the fine dining private chef realm and did that for a handful of years. And then I was reconnected with Nick at Hen of the Woods as he was about to open Hen of the Woods, which was going to be a restaurant and market concept. The original concept for Hen of the Woods was actually a white tablecloth restaurant. It evolved over the years to kind of a more upscale American, but, pretty eclectic style. We both have a lot of Italian and French, cuisine loves. So it's going to be that, but we wanted to have a market in the front of the store, in the front of the restaurant, where we were going to sell items that we were either using or producing in the restaurant. So we had a lot of really grand ideas for that restaurant. And this was 2012, 2013. So we think we were kind of ahead of the curve, but we wanted to do away with tipping. We wanted to put everybody on salary. We wanted the front of the house and back of the house to be one. So my primary role was going to be like liaison and general manager. I had hung up the culinary hat, but at that time we started making our line of kettle chips as a little side revenue. So
That's fascinating. So you guys were trying to build a business on your own terms in the restaurant space, which is really cool.
yeah, both of us have always kind of been outliers, and that's been the basis of our relationship over the past 15, 16 years now.
Yeah.
So yeah, the industry norm, no matter what the industry, has never really meshed with us very much. Or I should say we haven't meshed with it.
Yeah, yeah. And so you're making kettle chips at the restaurant and you're selling them in the market?
So the restaurant wasn't open yet. So we were
Right.
actually like pre-development phase. We were making the restaurant. So the catering company that I had started with my other partner, like I had left, he had kept it going. So we were using his kitchen to fry the potatoes,
Yeah.
and a couple other kitchens around town. And Nick was doing this pretty much on his own at that point in time with the help of one of our earliest employees. So originally we were just doing the red wine vinegar chip,
Okay.
which is our number one seller and always has been. And like Nick and I have actually been making a version of that chip since like 2008. We used to slice it gaufrette style, like thin waffle fry,
Okay.
think
Yeah.
waffle fries, but very thin. We would soak it in red wine vinegar overnight. We would spin it in a salad spinner, and then we would fry them to order for like the salmon dish that we were doing.
Wow.
I cooked so much salmon that now I cannot be anywhere near salmon. It was a very popular dish. So yeah, so we started making the red wine vinegar chip for one customer in Cincinnati. And then he was going to do a soda program for a different cafe here in Cincinnati. And the guy who was opening the cafe was like, how do you guys feel about doing like some other snacks for me? And he was like, sure, we'll do some more chips.
Right.
So Hen of the Woods Kettle Chips was born.
Wow.
Yeah. And that
And
was
that's about
2014 was
okay.
when we first made, well, we had like 4 varieties, and they were in coffee bags, handwritten labels. So yeah.
So in the beginning it was like, hey, why don't you do this for us? And you're like, sure, we'll do it for you. When did it shift to let's turn this into something else? Let's go bigger than just this relationship here.
It became increasingly difficult to find like fryer time at our friends'
Mm,
restaurants. So that was one thing. And then we found a local kettle chip manufacturer. It was about an hour from our warehouse, or where the restaurant was supposed to be, that eventually became our warehouse. But they did contract manufacturing, so reached out to them. I believe that was the fall of 2015, was when we first started co-manufacturing.
okay.
And we were just doing, even then, we were still working on the restaurant, and we still had hopes of opening the restaurant. Well, some of the people did. I did not. I was like, I'm done. Like, we can make money without being here. Like, this is what I'm signing up for. This is
Yeah.
me. So we were just producing plain chips or sea salt chips with the co-packer, and they were packing them in 5-pound bags, like just like trash bags. And
Okay.
then we were taking them down to our warehouse. We were seasoning them in mixing bowls, and then we were still hand packing and printing labels and doing everything like in small batches,
Okay.
that way. And we did that for about 6 or 7 months. And it was the winter of 2016 that we were finally like, okay, we've got attention of a small local distributor. We had started having conversations with our local Whole Foods store. And mind you, at the time we were in, the mom and pop markets, some other cool cafes and delis and whatnot, but no grocery at that
Okay.
point. Yeah, winter of 2016 was when we were like, okay, this is a thing. We have a following. People love this. There's a time and a place, and this is our time and place. Like, let's go.
Yeah.
So that's when we collectively scrapped the restaurant market concept. Just also happened to be like a month and a half after we had hired an executive chef. And we were like, so how do you feel about being our production manager? and managing production? And then how do you feel about doing the books for us? Because he had a finance degree and he was like, I'm in, because he had just had his first kid.
Oh,
I had just
yeah.
had my first kid like the year before. So like we all got used to the 9 to 5. We were all bought in.
Yeah.
Um, and so a few months after that, we got our first round of printed packaging, which was May of 2016. And that's when you could say that we were like a real chip company, I guess.
Yeah.
So
At that point, did you have a vision for how you would grow the business and what you all wanted the business to become, like a national brand, or you wanted to stay regional, or we're going to go, through distribution and maybe make this as easy on ourselves as possible? What did it look like at that point?
it looked like us putting chips in the back of my Subaru and the back of Nick's truck and driving around and trying to get whoever we could to buy them.
Yeah.
There was no plan. I mean, sure, we had like a vision of we're going to be in like Whole Foods. And I remember one time, Cincinnati is just north of Kentucky. And in northern Kentucky is one of the highest grossing Kroger's in the entire country.
Okay.
And so that was the Kroger that a lot of people in the area shop at. We were driving across the river, going to deliver chips, because we would literally just like drive around in my car and deliver chips, like
Yeah.
just the two of us or the three of us, like just like driving around, hanging out, having fun. We'd go get lunch in between. Like we were like, this is great. And we were like getting off the exit and we were looking at that Kroger and we were like, it's not for us. We don't want to
Mm.
do that. Well, that changed.
Okay.
But yeah, so you know, we as chefs, premium is in your mind at all time. Your ingredients are always top of mind, and a premium price tag as well. And
Mhm.
we just didn't think that our product would mesh well.
Right.
But we had no comprehension of scale and how we were able to evolve the brand and how you could take a premium product to conventional. So those are all things that we kind of learned along the way. So original vision, very little, if any,
Yeah.
was more of just we need to sell everything we make and pay our bills. That was the vision.
Yeah. And were you able to do that pretty early on?
Fortunately, our contract manufacturer at the time was like also relatively small, a
Mm.
very regional brand. So they were pretty supportive, but we had our challenges as you do with any
Yeah.
co-manufacturer, but we we were able to sell what we produced, but profits were challenging. The margins were tight. And at the time, we had no real CPG experience and we had not gotten into major distribution at that point. So we didn't necessarily, we weren't dealing with like the unforeseen expenses that we were eventually going to deal with by launching into KE and UNFIs. But
Yeah.
so yeah, I mean, we were profitable, I guess. But it's like if you go back and actually look at the books, I'm sure we weren't.
Right. So in 2016, you're driving around together, having a great time, delivering the chips that your co-manufacturer is making for you. Can you talk us through some of like the milestone steps of the growth in terms of distribution and how that changed for you?
Right about that time was when we first got the attention of Kroger. Like shortly after we had the view of we're never going to be in there, we got
Yeah.
an email from a Kroger broker. But that was also after we had finally made inroads with the local store manager of our Whole Foods,
Okay.
which back in 2016, you could work from a store level and get your product in.
Mhm.
Now it's local forager programs. So I would say that was the first big turning point, and that was the impetus for us to work with our first regional distribution partner. And I mean, we have pictures of the first skid going out and all that stuff. And the first time we sold a skid at the time, which was 30 cases, we were like, what are we going to like? This is insane. This is crazy. We need to sell a skid a day every day. This is the new goal. That was like the first big milestone. And we got in our local two. We have two Whole Foods here in Cincinnati. Now we have three, but at the time we had two. And then we got approved to sell store by store in the rest of Ohio and Kentucky. So we spent a lot of time driving around to predominantly Columbus was a huge market for us early on. And then shortly after the Whole Foods launch in Columbus, there's a grocery store chain, Giant Eagle, who has kind of a premium extension called Market District. And there's about 15 of those stores, and all 15 of them, the buyer was like, I want to put these in all of our stores. That was like the first big chance anybody took on us, like sight unseen, put us in an area where we had never sold before, really just put a lot of trust in the product and the brand. And yeah, we drove all around Ohio a lot in that next year and a half for sure. Lots of demos. Lots of facings in stores and trying to take care of those accounts.
So you mentioned margins are tight, and you mentioned that before mentioning Kroger and getting into Whole Foods and distributors. So I'm curious, was this a positive working relationship with distribution, and were the numbers looking good for you in terms of profit and margin and stuff?
Yeah. I mean, I have to say we weren't that analytical then. So we weren't necessarily keeping track of it the way that we should have been keeping track of it. So it's hard for me to say that it was or wasn't successful, if I'm being completely honest. But, Whole Foods has always been a pretty good partner, and there's a lot of transparency there. So I can say that Whole Foods we've been profitable with since like the day we launched.
Right.
Kroger was really challenging when we first launched, because we actually launched with a local distributor who did not have our best interest at heart. And was, our margin was pennies and his margin was like 50%.
Right.
So that one was very challenging and caused us to actually pull out of that relationship, which was the next kind of big pivot for the company, was when we did DSD with Kroger with 57 stores. It wasn't really until late 2017, 2018 that we really took handle on the books and became incredibly focused on our margins and the operation side of everything. So those early days, not a lot of tracking happened.
Yeah. When you say you ended up pulling out of that regional, local distributor, was it more of a relationship thing, or did you start to have an eye on the numbers? Was that sort of the impetus of is this really working for us? I'm asking this question because I think this is something that a lot of business owners experience, and shining a light on, what were the things you were noticing, or what maybe was happening in that relationship that was a red flag of this is not for us. Maybe we try to find a new way to do business with Kroger.
Yeah. I mean, the first red flag was our placement. So this was like a local product. It was a Ohio Proud program. And we got the worst placement on the shelf possible. It was so bad. And I was like, we're never going to sell any product. Doesn't matter what our price point is, what our promotional strategy is. It's not going to sell. And this is Kroger's first impression with our product. This cannot stand. Then our price point was incredibly high. I think when he first put it on the shelf, we were like $5.69 or something, and we're just like, no one's spending $5.70 on a bag of potato chips, especially when it's 4 inches off the ground at the bottom of these weird freezer densed out end cap things. No.
Yeah.
So there was that, and just poor response. And if we wanted to have a conversation about everything, it was always well, what about me? What about my margin? What about this? And it's we all have to win here. There are 3 parties involved here. There is Kroger, and they're going to do what they're going to do. There's a distributor, and there's a brand, and all 3 need to be made whole, and it needs to be a sustainable model. So even if just one of those is out of whack, it just doesn't work. And we knew very early on, you just don't get a whole lot of shots with these retailers. If you're first up to bat is a massive failure, they're going to take a while before they take another shot on you.
Yeah. So you're realizing all of these things, or seeing all of these things. You got high price point, bad placement, a not great relationship with the distributor. So you decide to change how you work with Kroger. For anyone listening who's maybe early on in the business, you sort of defined skid as 30 cases. So I think they got that one. But when you talk about a DSD, can you tell listeners what you're talking about?
Yeah. So DSD is direct store distribution. And that can mean a myriad of things. You can have distributors that do direct store distribution for you. But in this instance, and in many instances, it is when your company is doing the direct store distribution. So for us, we got expanded. So we worked with this local program and we were in about 15 stores. It got up to 19 as they flipped some of like the B stores to A stores and upgraded them to Kroger marketplaces. And even with the issues we were having, we were still seeing some sales because we were doing a lot of demos and we were the local brand. So it helped, but the category manager at the time expanded us, and by mistake, we were supposed to go into the warehouse. By mistake, the DSD box was checked. This was our broker at the time. It was no longer our broker. Filled out the paperwork incorrectly. So we got expanded. We were very excited, and we got the email and we got the forms, and it had the DSD box checked. And we were like, what do we do here? So that, we had to pivot the company. Like, we had essentially 3 months. I don't even think it was 3 months. I think it was like 10 weeks maybe to learn how to do direct store distribution for 62 Kroger stores, I think is what it ended up being. So we had to go out and rent 2 more vehicles. We had to hire a couple more people. Family members were involved. Wives were involved. It was like all hands on deck. And we created systems. We created a slew of like Google forms for going into stores, checking inventories that would feed into one spreadsheet that would trigger orders on another spreadsheet. We did that for, I believe it was 8 months. So as soon as we caught it, we were like, we can't be DSD. Like, we're not a DSD company. We don't have vehicles. This is not our thing. And he's like, well, you need to do it until the next reset at least. And we're like, okay, like we'll do that because we don't want to lose the placement. By the next reset, we got moved into the warehouse. So we had to make a huge pivot for, I think it was like 8 or 9 months, and then went back. But we were not able to focus on like anything else at the time. It was pretty consuming.
Wow. So your regional brand is sort of growing and expanding on a regional basis, almost like I'm picturing like a wave of Hen of the Woods growing. Did you, as a team, have visions of becoming a national brand? Did you guys start thinking like bigger and bigger and outside of your region?
Yes, very much so at that point. So that was 2018. And the end of 2017 was when we got our first email from like a retailer outside of our area, which was Central Markets. And they had come across our product because we had done some in and out deals with the TJ Maxx family of retailers. So they like found our product in Home Goods or something like that and loved it and reached out and wanted to go through KeHE. So that was our first experience with KeHE, which was when we really started to learn about the industry and how things really worked. But yeah, like once we opened the KeHE door and the Pandora's box there got opened as a small brand, you don't comprehend the struggles that come with opening distribution centers. You think that you have this tendency to be far more optimistic than you should be, which is fine. You created your product, you built a brand, you want to be optimistic. It's what you've done is incredible, but the customer doesn't know that at all. So when you launch in a state that you've never sold product before, it's not gonna sell necessarily. You always guarantee that it won't. Like it's very hard to just sell somewhere brand new. So we had the vision that we were going to be a national brand at that time for sure, and we opened like 7 distribution centers with KeHE in 6 months,
Okay.
and we were coast to coast, couple in Texas, couple out west, pretty saturated in the Mid-Atlantic and the Midwest region. So we had pretty much national distribution at that time.
I have so many questions about this. So 6 months is fast, and it
Yeah.
sounds like a lot of stores. Was this the first time that you were dealing with things like free fills and regional distribution fees and, to set up the different distribution centers? Is this when you're, like you said, you're learning a lot about what it means to be working
Yeah.
with a distributor on this scale?
Yeah. So that was like early 2018. And by September of 2018, we had to have a very long, hard look in the mirror of like, this isn't working. We are hemorrhaging money. And it wasn't necessarily the expense of stores, and it was just, we hired a broker. So there are lots of free fills and things like that happening. And we always try to be we have a pretty short leash on things like free fills and placement deals. We, at that point in time, we had definitely started to recognize where our product sold and where it didn't sell. So we had no aspirations of being in, supermarkets and, non-premium retailers. Like, we know where it works.
Yeah, I want to stop there for a second because I want every brand listening to hear this. If they're a premium product, which many of our listeners are, they get information from other experts in the industry that says like, get on shelf, and they're going to places that maybe aren't the best fit for them. And I think as the founder or the national sales manager, right, like knowing where the right place for your product to be, knowing that is a huge part of your success. It's less about how many stores am I in and how it's more about how many of the right stores am I in.
Yeah, I've got a few really annoying sayings that are kind of go along that way. And the first one that we have is like, we don't care about doors. All I care about is velocity. I don't care about doors. Doors are a vanity metric. And that is all that they are. You could have 10,000 doors and do $1 million a year, or you can have 1,000 doors and do $10 million a year. So there's a million ways you can look at it, and doors are not the answer. At that time, when we were expanding nationally, we were spread far too thin. We could not execute. We could not keep good track of our inventories. We couldn't predict when one DC was going to accelerate and one was going to deaccelerate.
Right.
So it was just all over the map. In some areas, we did really well. Like, we were in some DCs that were performing well. Like, we were out in the Stockton DC for KeHE, and product did really well out there. And we had some great retailers. We just didn't have enough great retailers to keep enough product in the DC to keep fresh dates. And, when you're not able to do your own transportation, you're relying on KeHE or UNFI to do your transportation. Those costs get added in to the retailer. And then you end up on the shelf and you're trying to sell another $5 bag of kettle chips. So it just becomes a game of, then you're trying to combat fees, which you cannot control, by offering discounts, by offering deals, by trying to do coupons. And that's really hard to manage. And I mean, we're a 4-person company. We still are a 4-person company. We've been, outside of our DSD days, pretty much a 4-person company, 5 at times, pretty much the entire time. So it's a lot to manage all of those independent promotions and discounts and be able to manage cash flow.
How did you view, and maybe you didn't view it this way in the moment, but you said, you realized the company is hemorrhaging money, something has to change. You took a hard look. Did you modify your relationship with KeHE? Did you pull completely? And what was the like feeling that was happening as you were making these changes?
So, as with most optimistic people, we thought we were going to be able to fix it.
Mm,
So we did not necessarily do anything at that time outside of like we just had to do a better job at tracking everything.
right.
Let's do a better job at keeping tabs on everything, and let's see if things can get better just by us monitoring it more closely, saying no, maybe a little more often. But the big issue, I would say, where it kind of snowballed for us was our first food show. Was when you have these retailers coming up and these key account managers, and they're tasting our product, which we think is the best kettle chip in the category, and they're telling us the exact same thing. They're like, this is the best kettle chip we've ever had. It's the most unique flavors. Your packaging is incredible. We love the brand. You guys are great. We want to put you in our stores. And we didn't know the difference between different types of promotions.
Okay.
OIs and MCBs and scanbacks and everything. So
Mm-hmm.
we were booking all of these deals at food shows, and then all the bills came due, and we were like, okay, we made a mistake, and we can't do anything about it now. These are contracts, so we need to do what we can to fix it and dig ourselves out of this hole.
Yeah.
So, on one hand, you want to curb the mistakes you've made. On the other hand, you need as much revenue as possible to dig yourself out of a hole.
Mm-hmm.
So, you can't cut everything. Otherwise, you just have less revenue coming in. That's when like a lot of the strategy started like coming into play. And we really had to start thinking about every single opportunity as its own independent opportunity, and creating forecasts for each individual opportunity, and figuring out when our break even was going to be. And
Per
that's
opportunity.
yes.
I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah, pretty much.
Sorry to interrupt you, but this
No,
is
you're
another
fine.
place where I want to pause for a second, because it feels like a struggle sometimes to get founders or members of the team to forecast, to project, because I think that it feels overwhelming. You guys tell us how it feels. Comment, like, let us know, like, what are you going through when you can't project? You're like, I don't know what the opportunity is, or maybe how many cases you're going to send to a certain number of stores for the first round, but you feel unable to project beyond that first delivery. I think it's so important to do. There's so much value in it, but so many people don't do it. So I would love to hear more about like the why, and why it was so important for you to forecast per opportunity.
One of the main reasons was our broker would come to us and they would say, hey, we're going to launch in these stores. Okay, where are they? They're in Iowa. Okay, why are we launching in Iowa? Well, we don't have any fandom in Iowa, but if we want to do this, what do we have close to Iowa? What do we have? Or Iowa's chain group is not that different than a Central Ohio chain group or an Indiana chain group. Like, a lot of this stuff is apples to apples. Like, if you can't glean insights from comparable retailers, like, you're either not collecting any data, which you are because you're selling product. And I will say the caveat is you need to be purchasing the reporting from these national distributors.
Mm-hmm.
If you can't swing those fees, you shouldn't be doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So you need that data, or you're flying blind for sure. It's not that hard to look at who is comparable to those opportunities. And I mean, I would cut stuff in half. Like, I would look at a Ohio retailer and be like, okay, if we're doing, example, 100 scans a week here, if we launch in Iowa, we might do 30. It'll be very pessimistic. Worst case scenario is you sell through it faster, and you sell more product.
Yeah.
Like, if you go the other way, then you're probably overproducing and you're not managing your cash flow properly because you're thinking you're going to pay back that initial free fill in 30 days when you actually might not get the second PO to cover that one for 120 days.
Mm-hmm.
So be very pessimistic when it comes to some of those opportunities.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say pessimistic, but be realistic. Don't inflate anything. Like worst case scenario is you have some out of stocks, and like working with those retailers and saying, sorry, we did twice as good as I thought we were going to do. Like we're doing our best here.
Yeah.
So we're going to make more product and we're going to get it shipped out.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I just think it's so great to hear from someone inside the brand saying, this is how we're forecasting and this is why we're forecasting this way. And you're the first person on the show who's talked about doing it opportunity by opportunity. So thanks for diving into that with us.
Yeah. I mean, we still, like my projections right now are I do projections by channel or by account. So all of our projections are by like Unified DC, by KE DC, Kroger, Amazon, direct to consumer, are different distribution partners. And each one of those forecasting models has potential promotions, plan baked in. It has any fees like the 1.5%. It has 2% 10 net fees built in, because even if they don't pay you in 10 days, anyone with that on their contract is going to take 2%. And good luck fighting it. So like we build in all of that. And we still do that. I mean, that spreadsheet for us is 100 tabs and it's our lifeblood.
Yeah. Yeah. We try to start brands out with just one tab, keep it as simple as possible, right? Your projections, you get a promotion tab, but yeah, the larger you get, the more advanced you get, the more comfortable they get doing that type of work, then we can expand, right? And get more and more detailed, which makes me very happy. I mean, I love to get that nitty gritty. Okay. So I took a pit stop there on that topic, but so your food show, you get yourself into some agreements that aren't the best, can't get out of them because they're contracts, doing the best you can, examining every opportunity. What else is happening?
From a account profitability standpoint, like we had gotten ourselves in much better shape and we were very confident moving forward in what we were building. And we knew that we were just going to have to start saying no to a lot. So we did close down some KE DCs at that time. We had scaled back to 3. Essentially, if they didn't have an anchor account, we stopped shipping them product.
Okay.
Which was fine. It was like, I mean, you're talking $5,000 a month, maybe for some of these DCs. For some brands, sure, that's a lot of money, but it's also like, look at your cost of goods. It's actually not that much money. Yeah. So don't be freaked out. So we started to reel that in, cut some of those off. And that's when we really started focusing like back on our home market and trying to just be more creative and think about accounts outside of the traditional channels. And we started going after, like, we always had a pretty strong foothold with breweries, but we really went hard after all of our local breweries and additional cafes. And we got into hotels and some other food service opportunities. And like, we just recognized that if we could get in places where the consumer maybe wasn't even responsible for the bill, or wasn't looking at it, like country clubs, swim clubs, golf courses, things like that. It's like people are spending $9 on a hot dog. What's $3 for a 2-ounce bag of chips?
Yeah.
Nobody cares. Again, it's more work on the distribution side, and you need to have a team to be able to execute on that. But it's just a lot more consistency. You have a lot more control over your cash flow. The golf course doesn't have deductions.
Right.
So if you send them an invoice for $130, they're paying an invoice for $130.
Yeah.
So it just became a lot more predictable to kind of manage our cash flow and start to chip away at some of the mistakes that we had made.
It's so interesting to hear. Also, Felice's voice is in my head right now. We mentioned her at the top of the episode. And when I first met her, one of the things she talked about a lot was owning your backyard. Yes. And just how, before you start moving on and moving out, just really ask yourself, have I taken full advantage of the opportunities in my own backyard where I can show up or my team can show up and we can build community and get our product into the hands of our people, you know?
Yeah. We say a mile deep before we go a mile wide.
Love that.
So
yeah.
that became our approach like late 2018 and into 2019. And I mean, I can say that it really hasn't changed. Like it's just, there's more organic growth happening outside of the region. It's just because people find out about our product and want to buy it. But our focus still is like absolutely crushing it in the Mid-Atlantic and the Midwest region.
It's so interesting to think about, you know, and to hear you talk about like where you're focusing. So I think another, you know, we talked about the vanity metric is number of doors. Around here, when we talk about, you know, the traditional view on how to build a CPG brand or how to grow a CPG brand, another, you know, that metric of like, well, I'm available in this many states, or I'm available in this many stores, right? It might sound, or it does sound impressive to someone who doesn't know anything about the industry.
Yeah.
And once you're on the inside, you know, as you are, and as many of our listeners are, you know, that you can't, and we talked about this during the fireside chat, right? Like you can't just say yes to something that will look good or like boost the ego a little bit.
Egos do not pay the bills. But no, I mean, even today, like here we are 8 years in, we have a meeting today with our sales company. We outsource a lot of our sales, and we've got a great outside sales team that we work with who they also do like inside sales for us. And every other week we have a meeting. The team goes over how many accounts they have brought in for the previous 2 weeks.
Yep.
Sales by SKU, any discounts given, which we do, you know, we still do placement deals. We just, you know, we're strategic about it. And when we first signed this company, you know, their focus was we really wanted to solidify some of our DCs and our anchors that we had. And so we had them focus on traditional distribution. And now we have them focusing on B2B e-commerce. And, you know, they were like, you know, the numbers are down. I was like, no, the numbers are not down. The doors are down. But this month you signed this many doors, and look at how much revenue per door that is versus the 60 doors you did in April and how much revenue it was.
Yeah.
It's like if you extrapolate these new doors over the course of the year, these pay for you. If you extrapolate the doors in April, they don't pay for you.
Right.
And good luck getting them to continue to reorder. So it's all about perspective on that kind of stuff. We're very much about dollars per door and types of doors.
I love that. I think that's another really great takeaway. There have been so many from this conversation. What did you say? Dollars per door? Is that what you said? Yeah. I think that's really interesting to think about, because when we talk to people about, you know, the strategy of growing your most profitable channels first to generate cash, right? To make the most money per door as you possibly can, there's a fear around that. Like, well, what do you mean? I have to sell a lot more units, or, you know, it's like, I have to call on a lot more people. And it's like, that's the work.
Yeah,
that's the work of growing the business. I used to work with a guy who, we had a coworker who was like, this is too hard. Like, this is too complicated. And, you know, we're like, it's work. It's called work for a reason. Like, we don't just come and chill, right? We got to do the work. And I think no matter what, it takes energy and effort to sell your product. And I'm a big fan of having that energy go toward the most money possible.
It also takes energy to commiserate and fail. So it's just like, just do the work.
Yeah. So tell us where Hen of the Woods is now. Like, how are you feeling? How, you know, what sort of region are you covering? And maybe what is the current focus or the next goal that you guys have?
At this point in time, you know, we've got great stability. We have great partners on the big grocery side that we know we like working with. And those are very solid. Those are predictable. We've had to make some changes to our promotional strategies, as costs have increased, as retailers are attempting to maybe take a little more margin on promotions. So, we're making some shifts there, but on that side of things are very stable, and we're looking to grow in those more traditional channels. At this point, we have pulled out almost entirely of KeHE. We do not work with KeHE anymore. We do still work with UNFI. They service all of our Whole Foods. We're in the Mid-Atlantic and Midwest regions, and they're obviously one of the best partners in the world. I wish all retailers were like Whole Foods. Transparency. You do not get nickel and dimed. The stores will have a conversation with you. Your category manager will talk to you. It's great. And I know there are other retailers that do an excellent job as well. They're an easy one to pick out though. But we are just as of like the last couple of months, kind of getting slightly more aggressive with retail expansion and chain group expansion. We are going to be activating a couple of more DCs outside of the Mid-Atlantic and Midwest region, because we have anchors that we're very confident in, and we know our product market fit in those areas will do well.
Right.
And we have our sales team to support those ventures, and I'm relying on that team for a lot of that. So internally, a lot of the things that we're focusing on right now is one, just keeping up with demand. We have, as with most brands, we've seen a lot of growth. We've seen rising costs. We've seen difficulties in supply chain. So just continuing to produce enough product has been somewhat of a challenge. It hasn't hit us too hard. We try to be really smart with our supplying partners. Like almost all of our raw materials are made in the United States. We have one aspect of our film that comes from overseas, but actually starting in October of this year, they are now sourcing that domestically as well. So our corrugate partner is vertically stacked. So they're their own paper mill. They do their own pulp. Our seasoning blending companies are all within 4 hours of our manufacturing plant. Our corrugate partner's 3 hours. Our packaging partner is 3.5 hours. So we try to keep everything as tight as we can. So that's been a big focus, is ensuring we have all our raw materials and that we're purchasing them in the correct quantities, and not overbuying to save a couple of pennies, which we've talked about before. People are like, I got to get my cost of goods down. I was like, well, now you have no money. I'd rather have 2 extra cents in my packaging and have money in the bank. But that's just us. But from a sales perspective and growth, we are very focused on B2B e-commerce through channels such as Mabel and Range Me and Fair. And there's some others, but those are the 3 primary. And those are the ones that we spend a lot of time and energy on. And I personally am very bullish on all things B2B e-commerce for a lot of reasons, but that's where a lot of our focus and growth has been.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's a growing segment. I think it's, I've gotten to know a couple of the founders and hopefully we'll have them here on the podcast soon. Their intention is to disrupt the traditional distribution channel, make it easier for brands and retailers to connect. And it's a really exciting, I think, part of the industry. And we're just seeing month over month growth on those channels like nothing else, I think, for a lot of our brands that we work with, which is really cool.
And it's affordable growth.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's predictable financial growth. There are no surprises. Your payout is your payout. So that's why we like it.
That's awesome. I do have one question left that I want to ask you. One of my clients had mentioned to me during a call that she'd love to know what's one thing that you wish you knew before. I know you're not the official founder, but before you launched or were part of the launch team, what's one thing you wish you knew?
Oh, That's tough. The thing that I wish that I knew, which might deter everyone from ever wanting to do this, is just like it takes so long.
Mm,
Like none of this is overnight. And maybe it is. Maybe you have a uniform product and you have a crazy market fit, and your best friend's dad owns a VC fund, and the stars align for you, and you get to exit in 18 months.
yeah.
But I also don't believe that that's a positive model for good food industry.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a big fan of consolidation. Yeah, I think that that's the big thing for me. It's like but if I knew how long it was going to take, if I knew like just how much of a grind it was,
Yeah.
I don't want to say I wouldn't do it. Um, but I feel like we definitely would have done things differently.
Yeah.
In the way that we kind of set things up and tried to add to the team at different points in time, because you're always like, we're one account away from changing this, and if we open up this distribution center, then we can hire this person, or if we get a few more of this, we can buy another van. And it's just like it doesn't compound like that when you're bootstrapping and you're based on cash flow.
Yeah. I think I'm actually really happy that that was your answer, because I had a conversation last night with one of the companies that I work with as their CFO, and in my opinion, he's come so far since last year. He's going to know I'm talking about him. I'm not going to say his name. He's come so far from where we were last year at this point, but he feels like it's been such a slow process and slow growth, and that he's like not far enough. And I was like, I will not allow you to not be happy and proud of like how far you've come. And he was like, it's not that I'm not proud. It's just like, I really thought that we'd be further along than this. So,
Yeah.
I think he's listening, and I think hopefully, my fingers are crossed, that you saying, it takes time is sort of affirming for him that, it's not just him. It's a part of
No,
the
it
process.
is definitely a part of the very long and ever grinding process. And I mean, even today, it's like we're dealing with things today and that we never thought we'd have to deal with, and problems and issues. And I put a post out the other day on LinkedIn that's just like, you get so much smarter as you're in this industry, but it doesn't make it any easier because the problems just keep getting harder. And they keep getting more expensive. So you're like, once I get the experience, it's like, well, the experience you have was for before.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was, you gained experience to do the things that now you already know how to do, but you're going to continue to level up. You're going to continue to have bigger challenges. And so, yeah, it's all just ladders.
Yeah. You mentioned LinkedIn. To everyone listening, Brady is an amazing follow on LinkedIn. Really great words of wisdom. Somebody who I tap and see what you're up to, and actually read your posts almost on a daily basis. I don't always get to LinkedIn.
I've really enjoyed it. It's newer for me. I think I started being active maybe like a couple of months ago.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of I'm pretty wordy, as anyone who listening to this will understand. I this unnecessary amount of words every time I say something, and I have a lot to say. I have so many opinions, but and if you go look at my posts, it's like, I hope you like reading. Like I'm not posting like a quote and then like some generic question to like, I'm just asking questions. Like that's not like, I try to actually talk about experiences, and offer information about insights that I've gleaned over the years. So, but yeah, it is just Brady DeLong on LinkedIn. I want to start to play more around on Twitter. There's some other like CPG people that I've started following, and they swear by the Twitter sphere for CPG. It's just quicker interactions, but I don't need another tab open. I have enough. So
well, we'll grab your LinkedIn link. We'll put it in the show notes for everybody. And again, I mentioned this last episode, we've got an email address now. So you can email join the convo at thegoodfoodcfo.com. And I want to say, if you have any like feedback, thoughts, or even questions that have come up as a result of this conversation with Brady, we'd love to hear from you. If there's one thing you wish you knew before you started your CPG or food business, we'd love to hear that as well. We can perhaps share that in a future episode. Brady, any final thoughts or last things to share before we say goodbye?
Yeah, couple things. One, for the listeners here, we have Good Food 15 for henofthewoods.com. Got a little promo for anyone listening. So we've got a fun little build a box feature on our website that you can kind of pick and choose. We have chips, we have dips, we do have chocolates, but we won't ship chocolates in the summer, and some other seasonings. So that'll be live. It does not have an end date currently. We are launching a brand new website in hopefully like 6 to 8 weeks that awesome. I'm stoked on. I can't wait. So that's really cool. And then if you do go to our website, henofthewoods.com, there is a tab for Out of the Woods, which is kind of our community give back arm of the company. So some of it is our sustainability measures that we take, which, being a co-manufactured brand, has its challenges. We don't control the whole thing, but we try to do the most of what we can control. Then we also give back to a lot of local communities through e-commerce events and donations. That's another arm. And the third is our food entrepreneurship support. So if you scroll down to the bottom of that page, you will see a little blurb on food entrepreneurship support. There's a link down there with an email address. I believe it is outofthewoods at henofthewoods.com. That email comes direct to me, but when we first launched the brand, it was very hard to find mentorship. It was very hard to just have some place where we could ask questions and get unbiased answers. Being in Cincinnati, we are in the land of CPG, but that just means P&G, and the guy in the office of P&G and my problems are not the same. So we try to provide as much help and feedback as we can. So feel free to visit that link or shoot us an email and get you some information or some help if we can. And we just want more brands to pay their bills and sleep at night.
Amazing. Well, Brady, thank you so much. It has been such a pleasure. So many bits of wisdom and I think really big takeaways for our listeners. So I appreciate you and your time, and thank you so much for being here.
Yeah. Look forward to hopefully coming back one day.
I think so.
All right. Good to see you, Sarah.
You too. Thanks for joining me and Brady for this Building a Business on Your Own Terms episode. I will continue to shine a spotlight on food businesses, their owners, and team members who are doing just that, and the lessons they learned along the way. And don't forget, you can always let me know what stories you want to hear by emailing the show directly at jointheconvo@thegoodfoodcfo.com. I'll be back with a brand new episode in 2 weeks.